J.R. Martinez, widely known for winning season 13 of ABC's Dancing with the Stars, came to Wilmington, Delaware at the Delaware Contemporary not to talk about that, but to connect with the audience in regards to the burn he suffered while in the Army at just 19 years old. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
I can tell you that at 19 years old, being in combat, you're not fully prepared. Obviously, there isn't a lot of training that goes into it, unfortunately, because they need you to get overseas and to be ready to deploy and to be in combat. And unfortunately, life hasn't really prepared you to be in combat. So, of course, at the age of 19, when I'm injured and I'm going through it, I just honestly thought that my life was going to end. That's what I kept coming to the sort of the place of peace of just accepting that my life will end in this way, in this place. And I just remember thinking to myself, I have to continue to fight. I have to continue to just try to hang on and give somebody an opportunity to come and save my life. And eventually somebody did, pulled me out and started the recovery process. And, it's easy to focus on my physical recovery because you can obviously physically see my scars and what I endured. But it's important to note that I equally mentally and emotionally had to recover as well. And that was more difficult than the physical recovery, which is the truth of a majority of veterans. And not all veterans have burns and amputees and have different visible wounds. Most of them are coming home with emotional and mental wounds. And even the ones with physical wounds endure that same thing.
Many trauma survivors often contemplate on how they will reclaim their identity when a life event challenges everything they used to believe about themselves, others, and the world. Part of giving back for Martinez is providing support to fellow burn survivors to help them regain control of their lives.
What I've learned in the military, in a short amount of time that I was in the military, but in uniform, I learned service. I learned about service, and that was my purpose. And for me, it was a matter of being able to find that same component outside of the military, in the civilian world, in my new life, how I can continue to serve, and I wanted that to be my purpose. And so for me, working with a variety of groups, whether it be Hispanics, because I am Hispanic myself, whether it be survivors, whether it be military personnel, whether it be children, for me, it's a matter of just trying to impact people, and that is my purpose, to serve others. And if that means by me sharing, if that means by me being vulnerable and open, and if that means, potentially me breaking down in certain spaces, I want to be as real as I possibly can, because that's what people can relate with. That's what they can connect to, and they want to feel like somebody else is going through exactly, or has gone through exactly what they're potentially going through in this moment.
Martinez, who underwent 33 cosmetic surgeries and skin grafts to recover from the severe burns he sustained to over 34% of his body while serving as an Army infantryman in Iraq, shared the tools that has helped him to get through each day.
I had to understand how to take control again, and I think in many ways I was always in the driver's seat. I just didn't have full control and understand how to move the vehicle. And I think most of us are in that position to where we feel like we're in the seat, we just don't know how to move the car in the direction we want to move it to. And I had to do a lot of work on myself. Honestly, it's very easy for me to point the finger at everybody else and anything else, but the reality is I had to look at myself. I had to look at within, and I had to do a lot of work, which required me going to therapy, required me crying a lot, to myself, journaling a lot, talking to my best friend, talking to my wife, and really being vulnerable and sharing a lot of that, and understanding what my triggers, the origin of my triggers. What were the things that bothered me? Why was I repeating certain cycles? So during COVID, I hope that there were a lot of people that have utilized this time to say, this is outside of our control. There's a lot that we can't control related to this virus and how it's affected our lives. What we can control is the time that we have at home. I know it's stressful for a lot of people, and everybody has a different scenario. However, it's important for us to spend the time to do the work and look at ourselves and figure out what it is that we need to be learning for ourselves, for our family, for those people around us.
At the Wilmington Library's Hispanic Heritage Month event, attendees learned about Martinez's upbringing with his mother, who was a victim to domestic violence and left to raise Martinez alone when his father decided to abandon the family.
My mother meets my father. Fortunately, my father repeats the same cycle. At 9 months old, he decides to leave. He has a different plan in life and leaves our mother again, abandoned. Who's she going to trust? Again, the cycle repeats. And for 18 years, for the first 18 years of my life, the only consistent thing my mother had ever experienced in her life was me. That was it. I was the most consistent man. I was the most consistent person. And so what happens is, of course, there's that love as a parent and of course as a mother. So she invests everything and she sacrificed so much for me, and I acknowledge that. But unfortunately, what I witnessed at a young age is my mother, in the midst of her trying to find love, she fell into some really bad relationships. And I witnessed my mother become a victim, become a victim of domestic abuse. And it was routine. So unfortunately, it was part of my routine. On the weekends when he decided to act a certain way, I needed to grab the phone, I needed to dial those 3 numbers, and I needed to wait for those individuals to arrive to care for my mother and to care for me. And at a young age, when my mother was the only thing that I had, and she was my superhero, she was the strongest person that I knew, and to see her in these vulnerable positions, what it did is I developed resentment towards her. Because I would say, why are you continuously putting yourself in this position? Well, let me tell you the downside of it. The downside is now at 18 years old, when I decided to join the military, I'm now, for the first time in my mother's life in the last 18 years, am leaving. So now, unfortunately, that feeling comes back to where there's abandonment, even though she understands that as a parent, your child, the whole point of being a parent is to allow your children to grow, and when they allow them to go and seek and see the world and pursue. But let me tell you what I had to learn as I got into my mid-20s, into my late 20s and early 30s. I had to learn that I had to set up boundaries with my mother. And that is something that is never part of my vocabulary growing up.
Setting boundaries with his mother is not the only life lesson Martinez had to learn. He still suffers from PTSD from the burn incident that changed the course of his life.
The challenge for me is mentally and emotionally, still to this day. And the reason I say that is because when you have the blessing of almost losing your life, it forces you to look at life from a completely different lens. So I have this urgency related to life that I'm not going to waste time, that I'm going to go out there and try to do everything I can every single day to take advantage of every single moment. Every opportunity that I get, I'm going to do the work to be prepared for that opportunity, because I understand that I easily could not have had that second chance at life. But I also equally understand that there are so many men and women that don't get that second chance at life. And I understand there are people in general in this world that don't get that second chance at life. So for me, there's this element of urgency to life of I'm going to go out there and I'm going to get it. I'm going to create it. The downside of that is I now start to put that same expectation on everybody else around me. When I start approaching my wife with that same urgency that you should feel about life the same way that I do, come on, let's make it happen. Why are we procrastinating? When I go to my best friend, when I go to people close to me, and I'm like, what are we waiting on? When someone tells me, oh, I don't feel good today, and I'm just gonna take the day. And I'm thinking, how many times have I not felt well? And I still gotta power through, but I can't put my own pain chart on other people.
Wow.
And so there's this element of, yes, it's a blessing because I look at life a little bit differently than most. But I also have to, as somebody I have to learn how to scale back. And I have to understand how to present. I have to understand how to approach people.
For trauma survivors who feel powerless, Martinez provides a message of greater self-understanding, awareness, and hope. His life is a true testament that wounded hearts beat the loudest. Reporting in Wilmington, Delaware, Yesenia Taveras, 22 News.